Hello, Comics Alternative fans. Before we start with the episode, we want to invite all of you to check out our Patreon campaign.
That's right. Go to www.patreon.com/comicsalternative for more details. There you'll find more information about the campaign and the cool rewards levels we have.
For as little as $1 a month, you can help us maintain good quality comics talk, and the more you contribute, the more perks you get.
These include monthly podcast episodes exclusive to Patreon supporters, as well as the chance to help us choose which books we review on the show. So be sure to visit www.patreon.com/comicsalternative and become one of our proud podcast patrons.
Yeah, and now on with the show.
This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, another conversation with Tim Seeley.
Countdown for blast off. X-5, 4, 3, 2, X-1, fire.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy, and we're two guys with PhDs talking about comics.
And on this special interview show, Andy is going to be talking with Tim Seeley, who's been a guest on our podcast before. But this is a different kind of interview, which Andy will tell us about in a moment. But before we get to that, we want to let all of our listeners know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by the good folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There you'll find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. The other publishers, you'll find the discounts are at 20 to 35% off cover price, and every single month they have incredible, unbelievable specials. Now, sometimes those specials are at 45% off cover price, sometimes they're at 50% off cover price, but many times the discounts are larger than that.
That's right, and this month, as in many months, you can take advantage of bundles where you can get multiple comics by the same publisher for a deeper discount than you might get if you were to buy those books individually. And DCB Service this month has a load of bundles to take advantage of, including bundles from the new DC series that are coming up, bundles for Valiant, Vertigo, Dynamite, and Archie, and other publishers. So you can check those bundles out at dcbservice.com.
Yep, they have a lot of different bundles every single month, but whether you're a bundle guy or you're a single issue guy, you will definitely be able to find a lot of impressive discounts. If you go to the website, dcbservice.com, go there for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do pre-order your comics there, please drop them a line and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you.
That's right.
And in fact, Andy, I have up on the website right now a link under our DCB Service banner where they can actually click on, and it'll take them to their email program where they can directly email customer service and say, hey, the two guys with PhDs sent me.
Oh, that's nice.
So, Andy, set up this interview for us.
On Friday, April 10th, I hosted part of the Sumter, South Carolina Comic Arts Symposium on the University of South Carolina Sumter campus where I teach, and our guest at that event was comic writer and artist Tim Seeley, who we've had on the show twice before. Mm-hmm. And I got to do a kind of one-on-one interview with him in front of an audience. And so I was able to record that interview. It was about an hour. We talked about his career in comics and his current work on series like Grayson, Effigy, Revival, and Sundowners. And like I said, this was part of a bigger event. I didn't talk very much with him about Batman Eternal because on the next night, Saturday, April 11th, I was moderating a talk with Tim and one of the co-writers on Batman Eternal, Ray Fox. Unfortunately, that talk could not be recorded, so you're getting the first part, but you may hear me make reference to the fact that we're going to have a separate event on the following night. But I thought since Tim said some things in here that I haven't really heard him or seen him talk about in interviews, I thought it was a really interesting discussion that we ended up having. So I felt like maybe our listeners would be interested in that.
Well, let's take a listen to that interview now.
Yep, let's do it.
Okay. I first want to make sure, can everybody hear me? We don't have a mic up here, so can you hear in the back? It's good. Okay. Well, I'd like to first of all, thanks to everybody for coming. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Andy Kunka, and I teach English here at USC Sumter, and I regularly teach classes on graphic novels and comic books. So I'm really excited that we're having this event here today with Tim Seeley. Tim Seeley is a comic writer and artist who has worked for pretty much every major publisher, including DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse. He is the co-creator of the horror series Hack Slash, and his current work includes DC's Grayson, the recently completed Batman Eternal weekly series, the creator-owned series Revival, Sundowners, and Effigy, and I guess just yesterday it was announced that Tim is going to be writing Deadpool versus Thanos, which sounds pretty exciting. So, please welcome Tim Seeley. So I guess I just kind of want to start out at the beginning. How did you get into comics in the first place as a reader?
As a reader?
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I lived in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. It's a town called Ringgold, and it has like 800 people in it. And there was no comic book stores anywhere near us or anything. But when we would go camping with my family, inevitably it would rain, and then my parents would have to keep us entertained. So they would take us to the camp store, which would have like old comics, you know. So I'd end up picking up. I would get Spider-Man and Hulk, and I learned to read off those at like 3 or 4. Like my mom was, saw my interest in it, and like instead of like, I think we started with see Tom, Dick, and Jane run or whatever, but then it was like see Spider-Man beat the crap out of Juggernaut, and like something about comics like got me like more than they got. They captured a lot of kids' imagination, but they kind of ruined me for life from that moment on. So then my parents were always encouraging of us doing things that were like academic-y. Reading comics was the closest we got in my house. So they totally fostered my interest, and everyone would buy me comics for Christmas, and because we didn't have a comic store until I was 13, so I would have to get them. Relatives in the big cities would send me boxes of comics that they'd find, and so it ruined me for life. And I would, as soon as I started reading them, I started making them without sort of any, idea that this could be a job. I was just like, I really like this language, and I want to draw Hulk kicking the crap out of a tank. It always something about it always got me.
So when you decided to make a career out of comics, were you first looking at being an artist or being a writer, or was both kind of always in mind?
Well, when I was a kid, when I'd make my own comics, I wasn't that smart to notice that in the credits that there was different people at first doing different things. So to me, making comics was it always meant writing it. It always meant drawing it. It always meant coloring the covers with Crayola markers, But when I started at first, when I went to college for illustration, I have a degree in illustration, and barely took any writing classes at all. In fact, the fact that I'm a writer now primarily is kind of a poop on the education I should have probably had in writing. But But yeah, I actually didn't think about, when I first started making comics to submit to companies or to sell at shows, like self-printed stuff, I actually just drew them. I would have my buddies write me stories because I didn't feel confident enough to do it. But I would always go in and change stuff. So then, in an attempt to keep my friends, I just started writing my own stuff. Because they would be like, why'd you change my thing? I was like, I had a better idea. And then I realized, like, it's because I wanted to be writing them, and I just didn't know how to approach that, and I never considered myself a writer,
So then how did you make that transition from doing your own comics to becoming a pro and making money at the job?
Making money at the job is still a relative concern, but but when I was like 19, 20, it might have even been earlier than that. I started going to comic conventions. As soon as I got, my parents would take us occasionally to, I lived in Wisconsin, and it was about a 6-hour drive to Chicago, which was the closest comic conventions. And my parents would take us for a day at the show, and I fell in love with comic conventions. Like, I would see these people sitting with their own comics, and that was my favorite part of the convention. I liked the back issues and the toys and stuff, but my favorite thing was the local artists making their own stuff. So like at 15 and 16, I decided I was going to do that. And I formed a company out of my bedroom called Prick Press. And our symbol was a finger. And our company was just me. And I started making my own books. And I applied to Wizard World, or originally it was called Chicago Comic Con in Chicago. And got a table and had no idea what I was doing. I made a comic. I didn't bring anything to hang up behind me, so I had to go to Kinko's and copy the cover and stick it behind me. But going to those shows made me meet other people, and I was sitting next to other comic creators and people that I would go on to work with. And so by the time I was like 19, I met this dude, Josh Blaylock, who was another photocopied comic guy. And he was like very business oriented, and I thought, well, I'm not terribly business oriented. I'm going to follow this dude around. So I kind of just hung out with him for years, and we talked about making comics, and he had me draw a book for him. And then one day, when I was 22 or 23, he got the G.I. Joe license. Bought it for a song, basically, because Hasbro didn't know what to do with it at the time. And he got the license. He's like, what the hell am I doing? I don't know. I'm 24 years old. What the hell am I doing? So he hired me to come work with him, and then I ended up becoming the artist on G.I. Joe, because all the artists we worked with were two. I think I heard a squirrel back there too, or something. Maybe some.
No. With the GI Joe covers, have timed perfectly. Up here.
Very nice. But yeah, so there's. But it ended up being, the artists on GI Joe were always late, and we were working with Hasbro, which is a bunch of dumb kids. We didn't realize, corporations have requirements. They don't like it when you put their main characters in sexy lingerie, and so we were having trouble. We always have trouble with what they wanted us to do. So. I ended up drawing the book because it was easy for me to take the notes, like this tank needs to look just like this, or this gun can't, or you can't put a gun in someone's face. We need to change that. So I just became an artist on G.I. Joe, and I did that for 2 or 3 years, and then I was like, shit, I'm a comic book artist now. I make money at this. This is my living. So it ended up being, the path towards where I am now, I guess, is the same path that started there.
I'm glad that I asked you not to swear, and you've now given the middle finger and said the S word. So thanks a lot. That's okay. We're all adults.
I tried so hard.
You did say poop at one point. And I was
covered myself.
We're on the right track.
I covered myself. All right, I'll watch it. That's the thing. Your comic bars, you work by yourself. And I have a studio mate, but I don't have to deal with the public very often.
Yeah.
So I forget that you're supposed to be well behaved in the real world.
So how did you get from G.I. Joe to your kind of creator-owned successful series like Hack Slash?
Well, so when I was working on G.I. Joe, dealing with Hasbro was difficult and would give me stress. And so I decided I was going to do a comic that was the exact opposite of G.I. Joe. So I came up with this comic Hack Slash, which was a sort of homage to that. We timed that.
Yeah, we did, just about.
But I came up with this comic Hack Slash, which was an homage to like all the great exploitation slasher movies, and it was about a girl who sort of survived a slasher movie named Cassie Hack, and she decides to hunt down slashers. So it was like Buffy, except instead of vampires, she fights Jasons and Michaels. And it was going to be like dirty and swearing and gore and everything I couldn't do in G.I. Joe. And I was so motivated to do it because I was so frustrated by the Hasbro stuff. And then I met this artist named Stefano Caselli. He was an Italian guy. I actually didn't meet him. We met on the internet in 2004. And I pitched him the idea, and he's like, "My friend, I'm an Italian. Of course I love the slashers." So we teamed up to do this book, and it ended up being like a mild success. Like, it was Devil's Due's bestseller after G.I. Joe. But I wrote that because I didn't have. I was drawing G.I. Joe, so I didn't have time to draw it, and that sort of got me onto that point where I would write one book a month and I would draw one book a month, and they wouldn't be the same book.
So you said Hack Slash was a mild success. Could you talk a bit about how that kind of grew as a successful property, and what kind of readers were attracted to it and so on?
Yeah, when we first started doing it, I was just doing it because I needed to get some stuff out, just for whatever reason, I think when we first started coming out, I mean, we sold pretty well, but we were a small company, and it didn't have obviously the name recognition of G.I. Joe, but I think it attracted a kind of reader that wasn't sort of well served in comics at the time, which was one, horror fans, and two, women. Because at the time, I think, there was a lot of women sort of coming into having interests in pop culture stuff, but not a lot of stuff made for them. And Hack Slash was, it was certainly, cheesecakey and showed a girl running around in her underwear, but it was also kind of, it was very empowering, and it was also sexy in a way that I think women who were interested in comics weren't used to, which was men making the kind of women that men want, which is like the giant double D boobs and tiny waist, and I wasn't interested in doing that. I wanted her to be a real girl, like a real woman, and that sort of appealed to this sort of burgeoning subculture at the time of like girls who were into that kind of stuff, and then suicide girl types, and that actually led us to gaining a lot of people who were involved in those kind of websites, and the burlesque community and the horror community and the fetish community. And then the book, when we would put it out in the monthly editions, would sell okay, but we would make in these big fat collections where we put 20 issues in it, and those would sell 5 times more than the regular comic, because these were people who were buying it not at comic book stores, they were buying it at bookstores or horror conventions or Amazon, and so it ended up being very successful that way, which was unusual at the time, but it ended up being sort of the way I think most people who do create their own books end up making their actual living on the books. Is you get to sell those trade collections, and it's like being a book author that way instead of being a comic book author.
You mentioned the Hack Slash had this appeal to female readership, and that's a nice segue actually into talking about your current stuff, because both Revival, I think that it's not going automatically anymore, so both Revival and the new series from Vertigo, Effigy, feature female protagonists. And I guess if you could talk about Revival, when I try to explain what Revival is, and those who are here are students of mine, I gave them copies of the first issue of Revival to look at. When I try to explain it, it sounds like a zombie comic, right? But then you got to kind of think, well, not really. They're not really zombies. Yeah. So how do you look at that series, or how do you? I
wish I was better at describing it too. But Revival is to me it's a crime series set in a small town where a number of the residents of the town came back to life with no explanation, and the families of the people have to deal with people they thought were dead coming back, and then the city is put under quarantine because no one's sure if this is a communicable disease. Coming back to life, it would certainly be dangerous for the whole world to suddenly come back to life. So it's really just kind of about the tensions of small town and crime and how we treat each other and dealing with mortality, I guess. But also there's blood and guts and monsters and stuff like that in it. But yeah, I consider it like a quiet horror story, like a very small, sort of intimate horror story, and the people that are undead are not like us, but they're not brains. They're not that kind of zombie. So they're dealing with the fact that they are no longer mortal, and to me that's more interesting than like the idea that you have to shoot grandma in the face because she's trying to eat your brain. Because I've seen that a million times,
Is that something you look at? I mean, this may tie into your other work too, where you look at a genre and you think about, this is what I've seen over and over again in that genre. I want to push it in a different direction.
I think so. I mean, part of it is just that my point of reference for stories is that I grew up reading tons of comic books and watching tons of B movies. And my dad was a big avid collector of, like, if it was crappy and had lasers or monsters and girls in bikinis, that's what we watched, So that kind of fulfills, like, that's the stuff that forms my idea of stories, even though I've now gone on to read actual classics and things. But at the time, I think that stuff forms my interest. So I knew I've wanted to do a zombie story for a long time, but I felt like the survival aspect, I mean, even before Walking Dead, I know that's pretty surprising, but to me, the thing that usually forms the backbone of a zombie story is survivalism, which I'm not particularly interested in writing about now. Maybe someday, but I knew if I wanted to do a story that played around with sort of dealing with mortality, which I am interested in, that I wanted it to be more about, no one in that town is concerned about the sort of usual, I mean, they still live in a town, they still have the support of each other, but they're dealing with the tension of, adding this sort of unknowable question, why did these people come back? Why them? Why not us? And that to me was more interesting. I think it kind of plays, I mean, I grew up in this small town, I set my story in, so I know it very well, and I also know the tensions that go with, a small white town in northern Wisconsin. In the 80s, there was this influx of Laotian immigrants, and I saw that as a kid, this sort of weird tension that caused. So I wanted to kind of tell a story about that, as well as being able to have, like, cool, gory monster stuff,
Revival is at about issue 28 right now?
Yep.
And how, is there an end in mind for this?
There's end to it. I think it goes to like 50-ish. That's one thing that you get to do when you do create your own books is you get to decide when it ends. Obviously, when you're working on Spider-Man, you don't get to be like, all right, guys, I had finished my Spider-Man story. Can you please end it now? Because they will just laugh at you. And but when you do your own create your own stuff, you get to determine when the story is over. And I did it with Hack Slash. I determined when the story was over, and I kind of regret it. Sometimes I wish I'd have kept it going, and I'm always trying to think of a way to come back to it. But with the Revival, I think it's important that it ends. I think, sometimes knowing something will be there forever takes away the true impact of the story, But it doesn't seem to affect Batman that much, so.
You work on Revival with the artist Mike Norton.
Yep.
Talk about the kind of working relationship that you have with him. How do you create the book?
Well, so the artist on Revival is this guy Mike Norton, who I worked with at Devil's Due, and I've been in the same studio space with the man in various companies for like 13 years at this point. And so we always wanted to work on something, so we came up with Revival as a thing that would capture both of our interests. Mike likes drawing sad people in snow, and I like to write pretty girls and gothy murder stuff. So we combined those things and made Revival. And the process is sort of, he sits about 8 feet away from me. So I'll type something, they'll be like, Mike, is this okay? And he'll say, no, it's dumb. I'm like, okay, I'll change that then. But once we start, once I hand him the script, we can, there's a lot of flexibility in it because I know I can trust his vision, and I know I can look over his shoulder if I need to and make sure he doesn't screw it up. But it's really about collaboration, I think, which comics are a collaborative medium. That's one of the coolest things about comics is that unless you're a cartoonist and does everything yourself, someone is interpreting your story or you're interpreting someone's story. And I think for Revival, that's sort of the point. Sort of one of the things that is interesting about it is this is me and my sort of Wisconsin upbringing, and Mike's bringing in his. He grew up outside Memphis, and So it's, we're sort of combining our viewpoints. And he's not a horror guy. He's not into horror at all. So, I can be like, I've seen every Flash movie made in the last 20 years, and he can be like, I like to draw pugs. And we somehow combine those things into a new story.
Then let's kind of move into some of your other more recent stuff, since both Revival and Effigy can feature. Revival has a kind of huge cast of characters. Effigy, which is in about the third issue, I think, or so, has come out of that, and that also has at its center a female protagonist. So could you talk about, first of all, describe what Effigy is?
And why I always write ladies? Well, Effigy is a book I'm doing at Vertigo, and it's about a girl who, she was a star on this sort of kids TV show called Star Cops, and it went for like 7 seasons and then got canceled, and she no longer got any work in Hollywood, and she decided to go move back to her hometown and become a cop, a real cop, not a star cop. And then she has to deal with this really weird murder that seems to be tied to an episode of her show, her old show, and it's sort of about celebrity, and there's like a weird cult sort of forming out of the ashes of this TV show, and it's sort of about how, we treat celebrities these days sort of like the formations of religions to a degree. But it's not that serious. It's also got, action and murders and a guy with a dog head named Meatball and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's sort of similar in a way to Revival, but it's a very different. It's more about sort of the sleaze of Hollywood stuff, and it also comes from when you work in comics, you meet a lot of real celebrities, like former actors and people you have to go to Hollywood and like pitch your stuff to producers and stuff, and so you get to see that world but not be part of it. So there's a lot of observations from me on the outside about life after fame and making films and kissing butt and stuff like that I wanted to throw in there. But as far as when I started doing Hack Slash, I made a resolution to myself, which was I'm a white straight guy. So many comic book characters are white straight guys. Too many comic book characters are white straight guys. So I will never make a new character who's the lead of a book who's a white straight guy. So just because there's plenty, right? There's plenty. And it's also a challenge for me as a writer to have to be sympathetic and interested in someone else's viewpoint and their life. So that's why Cassie is a bisexual woman. Her partner Vlad is a black guy, and then Em and Dana are both their sisters. They're the main characters. Revival, and Chandra in Effigy is a black woman. Just because there's not enough. I think we spend so much time in pop culture excluding people that that I owe it to all of us to do. We all owe it to it, but I'll make sure, that I don't add any more than we need. We have enough. We've got Captain America, and he's the best white straight guy in comics. So, no need to do another 100 of them.
I feel like we should segue into Grayson from that to talk about the straightest, whitest guy.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I didn't create him though, but yes, he is the straightest, whitest guy in comics.
But actually, getting back to Effigy, do you see Effigy fitting into this kind of situation like we talked about with Revival, where there's a genre that you're kind of twisting or playing with that book?
Yeah, for sure. To me, it's sort of it's a mystery story. I really wanted to do something sort of and this is weird because no one knows. If you read Effigy, you're gonna be like, what the hell are you talking about? But at its heart, it's sort of I guess a version of a Dan Brown book to a degree, where someone is. I don't even read those books, but it's a take on that sort of world hopping conspiracy adventure. When I was a teenager, I was super into conspiracy books. The Illuminatus trilogy was one of my favorite book series of all time, and I wanted to do something like that, but put to me the most conspiracies that go around now are sort of about the government and stuff. The government is so disorganized, and people think that they care to watch us all the time. No, who's watching us is companies who sell us crap. That's who watches you, and this sort of idea of celebrities becoming new versions of gods was really interesting to me. So it's sort of that sort of story, but it's put through a really weird filter. Which I think as it goes on, people will start to catch what it, that it's this sort of, in a weird way, it's like an Indiana Jones archaeologist of pop culture instead of history.
Well, I can editorialize or whatever. It's a really fun book, and I think at the end of every issue, there's a twist comes that I wasn't expecting, especially with the religion that you're building that we don't really know what it is. Seems like Scientology, but
and that was also something I was really interested in too. Is how we can. It's really easy to judge something like Scientology, being like, it's really stupid. It has aliens who live in volcanoes. It's like, yeah, that's really stupid, but sometimes think about your own religious beliefs and be like, that's actually really weird too. Like if you see them from the outside, it's easy to judge other things. So I thought in this we could have this. In Effigy, there's a religion based on like these giant forgotten war gods that float around in space and all this stuff. It's like, it sounds ridiculous, but yeah, all religion sounds a little ridiculous if you look at it from the outside.
I just watched the HBO documentary Going Clear, and so I was thinking in relationship to that and Effigy, we could like put you on the cans here, what they did, the auditing, I don't know if...
Yeah.
And I'll just ask you over and over again, what's your first memory of comics? Is there an end in mind for Effigy?
No, that's the best thing about. So I realized with Revival, I had made something that was sort of insulated and had to end. And the point of Effigy, to a degree, is it goes as long as it's fun. Mm-hmm. Like I can drop the ending to it. It's modular and sort of just the world of it is really big, so I can add crazy stuff to it. Like by issue 6, there's a cult of snake worshipping people. Like weird stuff can happen. So So that one I'll just keep it nice and flexible, and if I'm doing it in 20 years still, that's totally fine.
Before we get to your kind of mainstream stuff, the one other current ongoing series, a creator-owned series that you're doing is Sundowners for Dark Horse. Can you talk about what Sundowners is?
Yeah, this is the really weird one, but Sundowners is about a group of people who have a support group because they all have this impulse that at night they feel the urge to put on a costume and run around and punch evil. So it's treating the idea of superheroes as a mental illness. So they have a group called the Sundowners. But as they start talking about this weird urge they have, they start to realize that they all see the same things. And in this case, it's people with glowing skull heads. And so they start to wonder if they're crazy or if they're actually seeing stuff. And it's also sort of my take on like the way that we think that when you see a real person in the real world who gets arrested in your town because he's dressed up as a superhero and punched a criminal, you're like, that guy's crazy, clearly. But when they do it in a movie or in a comic book, you're like, that guy's awesome. So I wanted to explore that weird thing, like why do we think these people are nuts? Because their hearts are in the right place. But yeah, then it's also sort of a weird horror series with that. And that, to me, one of my greatest fears is, what if you don't know you're crazy? What if you are going through your life and you're like, I'm good, but on the outside everyone's like, that guy is... I was going to swear, so I didn't. So that's always like a thing that I find terrifying, and I thought that would be an interesting basis for a superhero story. And superheroes are sort of inherently about people on the outside sort of protecting us from things that we don't see, so I wanted to play with that too.
Now, is there an end in mind for that?
Yeah. So it ends at issue 11. I've got other plans for it, and I totally fell in love with those stupid characters, so I really want to do something more with it. But you can get the first trade out in early May.
And kind of keeping with the series that you're creating or co-creating, since you've had a career as both a writer and artist, does your role as artist, kind of, even if you're just writing the series, inform the way you're creating the new series? Yeah, I mean,
I do a lot of, for me to develop a series, I have to draw the characters out. So anybody that works with me gets like a pile of drawings that I do. That's how I have to figure it out. I can't just tell you, I think this character is like this. Like I have to draw it out, which I'm sure makes some of my collaborators crazy. But yeah, so the way I do things always involves a little bit of art in the beginning. And then once I'm comfortable, I can step away and let the artist do everything. But yeah, for Sundowners, like I designed all the characters and worked with the artist with a look in mind and stuff. And I designed all the characters Effigy, and then the artist didn't. She totally did her own thing. She ignored them completely, which I was like, well, I did my part. Hers are better. That's fine. But I had to develop it. I had to design them.
Okay, well, we can move on to the mainstream stuff, the superhero stuff, and Grayson. So, Grayson is a character who's Dick Grayson's been around for 75 years, right? And he was Robin. He was Batman's original partner. What's his status now?
So in the new series Grayson, basically Dick was believed dead after the results of a storyline that they did DC called Forever Evil. But what we said was he actually was sent undercover to work in a spy organization called Spiral. And now he's like a globe-hopping super secret agent who also happens to be an amazing acrobat and is like the most lovable superhero character by ladies and gay men alike. Because Dick Grayson is, if you don't know, in the world of comic fandom, Dick Grayson is like the heartthrob. Like, he's cool. He's a nice guy. He's Batman without the grim stuff. Like Batman would be a crappy date because he'd be like, just under his breath all the time, be like, I hate the waiter or whatever. But Dick is just a cool guy. He loves everybody. He's always trying to save everyone. So we decided to lean into that and be like, let's make Dick, this one's for the ladies. This is for the, so he's always getting shirtless and stuff, and but it's a fun series. It's about sort of, he's a guy who grew up with Batman as his mentor, and so he's amazing. But he actually cares about people. He doesn't like to be alone. And so now he's kind of out on his own. He's out in the cold, and for Dick, that's hard. Because he's a guy that he loves the Bat family. He loves having Batgirl there, and he loves having Batman there, and he doesn't have that. And so it's him dealing with a hard thing by being even more charming and fighting a bunch of crazy villains that are sort of more in the vein of the spy story villain, than the supervillain.
And you collaborate on Grayson with another writer, Tom King. How's the collaboration?
It's good. So with DC, when I got hired to write Grayson, the editor on the book was leaving. So she hired me, and the new incoming editor hired Tom King, a former CIA spy who was also a novelist. And instead of being like, oh, I'm sorry, guys, I got to give only one of you the job, the new editor said, you know what, why don't you guys work together? And we didn't know each other. We'd never met. But we had to get on the phone and make this book work. And somehow we get along really well, and we're totally on the same page for the book. But the way we write it is we talk about every issue on the phone, and then we each take a different issue. So, I wrote 4, Tom wrote 5, I wrote 6, Tom wrote 7. So we just split them up, and he sends me the script when he's done, and I say, yep, that's pretty cool. Good idea there. And then, so each individual issue has a voice that is not necessarily the same, but the long-term vision is exactly the same. Which is a weird way to do stuff, but it is an experiment that worked. People like that book, so I don't know. I decided not to mess with it. We're gonna stay on our system of how we write Grayson.
I'm gonna kind of save a larger discussion of Batman Eternal till tomorrow, since you and Ray will be together on the stage. But since we're talking about collaboration, you're on Batman Eternal, the weekly series that just wrapped up one big 52-issue story. You're working with how many collaborators in the writing department?
Well, there's 4 writers total and 2 editors, 1 editor towards the end, and then so it's like at a sort of a minimum of 5 people with input on any given thing. But we did that one also similar to the way we do Grayson, which is we all talk about it, and there's an outline, and then we split them up. So the voices change a little bit, but the unified vision was the same. And it's sort of like working in TV, because TV is often written by a writer's room where people meet, they plot the story out, but it's given to one person to write the episode. But there's like a showrunner. And so in Batman Eternal, the showrunner was... The squirrel's back, by the way.
Yeah.
The showrunner was Scott Snyder, who is a big, very popular Batman writer, so it's not like any of us were going to argue with him, because he knows his Batman, obviously. So our job was just to, jam together and make something that was full of ideas, which is an awesome way to make comics, actually. I would totally do that again. I enjoyed the process of that one.
Do you have anything else coming out that you can talk about?
Deadpool versus Thanos, which they got outed yesterday, but that's just a big crazy fight comic. And Thanos is the bad guy in Guardians of the Galaxy and Avengers movies, and Deadpool is I think everybody knows who Deadpool is. He's just a wisecracking jerk, and Thanos is super serious. He is super serious. He's super serious. But they both are in love with the same woman, who's actually the mortal form, or the sort of human form of death incarnate. So it's a love story about two guys in love with death who just shoot each other in the face, like for 4 issues. But yeah, it's really funny.
That's good. Did you pitch it that way?
That was the pitch. That was the pitch right there.
Well, thanks to everybody for coming. We're going to have a signing in the back of the room. There's some books for sale. You can pick up Revival, Batman Eternal, Effigy.
Did you say Batman Internal?
Internal, yeah. Chris is working on that one. And Effigy, Sundowners, and Grayson. So
Sweet.
You can pick those up in the back.
I'll go sit back there.
Thanks.
Thank you. Well done, sir.
Oh, thank you.
That was great, Andy. I'm glad that you had the opportunity to record your conversation with Tim. And wow, now he's back on the show for the third time.
Yeah, and I'm glad that the technology worked out so that whole interview was actually audible on the recording. So I was happy that we were able to do that, because like I said, Tim talks in a really kind of open and honest way about his career, about what, the work he's done in the past, what he's doing now, and what he kind of hopes his career will look like in the future.
And I'm sure that we'll have him back on the show after his career takes other turns. And so it's always good to see how things are developing with him. And if you want to pick up some of Seeley's books, many of which he talked with Andy about in the interview, well, you can do so. If you want to pre-order them, you can go to dcbservice.com. That's where you can pre-order comics. But if you want something like Revival or / anything that's already been published, go to the sister company of DCB Service, and that is In Stock Trades. So whether you go to dcbservice.com or instocktrades.com, you can't go wrong. Great place to buy comics. And after you do get your comics there, get in touch with us and let us know the kind of things you're going to be reading, Seeley and otherwise. If you go to our website and you press on the Send Voicemail tab that you'll find in the right hand of your browser, from the comfort of your own browser, you can leave us a message through SpeakPipe. It's just that simple. Or if you're a difficult kind of person, you can call us the old-fashioned way. Our phone number is 415-3-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427.
That's right. Or you can get a hold of us by email. We are two guys at comicsalternative.com, or you can get a hold of us individually. I'm Andy at comicsalternative.com.
And I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com.
And you can also find us on Twitter. And on our Twitter feed, we announce new content to the podcast as well as updates to the blog. You can find our Twitter feed at the number 2 guys with PhDs.
That's right. You can also find us on Facebook, on Tumblr, and on Instagram. You can subscribe to the podcast through iTunes. You can stream us through Stitcher. You can also listen to us through TuneIn. And you can find every single one of our episodes, as well as our growing list of reviews and comics-related commentary, on our website, which is comicsalternative.com.
It's always to get a hold of us and let us know how we're doing.
Yep, and we like to hear from you. Until next time, though, I'm Derek.
And I'm Andy. See ya.
I can't believe I ate that whole thing.
No, Ralph, I ate it.